This is kind of like if you hang around on Sunday mornings and you're watching all the TV news talk shows. They have Meet the Press, they have Face the Nation. Well, a lot of times what they do is they'll take their journalists and set them around each other and talk about the world events and the things, the opinions and things of that nature. This is the local version of that. Of course, Mr. Slagle is the journalist and the host for Executive Session, and we have Tom here. Of course, Mr. Season has also hosted several segments here on the Maslow Magazine show over the past year or two. So we decided to bring these guys together and talk about something that I guess we'll say a change in the political fabric. We went through a big change, and actually this is the first Sunday since the inauguration in Washington. And since that change, obviously there's a lot of people who are celebrating. There's a lot of people who are absolutely surprised. And people are lost. There's division. There's all kinds of things that start in Washington and trickle down to here locally. So that's why we decided to address this issue as we go into a whole new year of different folks in the White House and how it's going to affect us. And that's probably my opening question for these gentlemen is, how do you feel the political changes in Washington will affect us here in Stark County? And I'll start with Larry, because the D of Democrat comes before the R of Republican. That's the only reason, Tom, the only reason.
That's fine.
So how do you feel it's going to make the change? And I know there's probably a whole load of things that you could probably express on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure we know yet. I think
True.
Part of the problem with the Trump success is that I'm not sure he has an ideology that doesn't start with T for Trump or M for money. So really what he's going to do will probably surprise us all to a degree. I mean, it wasn't that long ago he was professing to be a Democrat. Certainly the policies that he's given out have lacked so much in specifics. I don't know that anyone can predict what he will or will not do.
Basically unpredictable at this point.
Well, I think so. I think the one damaging thing that's without question happened from the election is I see the President of the United States as being somewhat a projector of righteousness and moral authority. And he has, during his campaign, had just threw that projector out the window. Mm-hmm. So that what he was projecting is, in my opinion, very damaging to the country, should be very concerning to most Americans, because he wasn't playing on the best in America, he was playing on the fears of America. And as much as you may not have liked President Obama, and I think Obama was an absolutely fantastic president who didn't achieve some of the things he wanted to achieve, mm-hmm. but he carried himself with dignity and respect in office at every step of the way. And I think the two differences are going to be like night and day, I'm afraid.
So you're questioning, obviously, not so much the party issues, but the moral compass of Donald Trump. He has not.
Well, I don't
at this
know,
point.
Well, I don't know if he has one or doesn't have one.
Right.
Certainly,
We'll see.
I haven't seen one that I would have subscribed to. You
Okay.
know.
Now, as we roll over on the Republican side, I know there's a lot of celebration with the Republican Party mm-hmm. pertaining to not just the election of Donald Trump, but the down house ballots, or the down house, or the down ballot elections. And when you look at that, Tom, how do you feel as representative from the Republican Party about how that happened, and how do you feel about Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, I think the question you first asked was, how do you think it's going to affect Stark County?
Sure.
And I agree with Larry on one point, and we really don't know yet.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with Mr. Trump being not specific in what he said he was going to do, because I think we have to wait and see when he gets in there to clean up the mess, of course, that Obama had left this country in. I really think that what you saw in this election, not only on the national level, but also on the state level and the local level, is I think that people were just tired. And I'm proud to say that I'm one of the deplorable, xenophobic, racist, stupid white men who voted for Donald Trump, because I think it's time for a change. Mm-hmm. I think we're kind of all excited about some of his economic policies in the fact that he is a businessman. And I really think that it's time that we got away from the politicians running the country and really got more into a business type model for running the government. I was a leader of government agencies, being with the board of MRDD, and yes, they were public entities, government entities. And our board was a lot of times made up of business people who always said that we needed to run our agencies, even though they were social service agencies run by taxpayers' dollars, we needed to run them like businesses. And I think that maybe you'll see Donald Trump do that. And you can see that he's already done some wonderful things as far as economics, saving jobs, bringing jobs. And the way you do that is a businessman, he gets on the phone and he talks to people. And I really think that that will trickle down. Economics, it comes from the top. I think as your leader leads, so does it trickle down to the local level. So,
Larry?
Well,
but I think we have to wait and see, what happens, how he does that. People have to work together, and we'll see how that comes about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm kind of sad to hear Tom say is one of the deplorables, because I think there were elements in our society that were supporting Donald Trump rather vigorously that were in fact deplorable. And if you don't think that racist and racism isn't deplorable, then I'm shocked by that statement. Now, as to him being a successful businessman, I don't think there's any evidence he's a successful businessman. I think he's successful with his sale of his snake oil. If he would have shown his tax returns, we might know he was successful, but I suspect the reason we don't see his tax returns is because he's not the successful businessman he says. And the trickle-down economics has never worked. And Obama took over an economy that had been run by the Republican Party for 8 years. The Bush-Cheney war on Iraq that wasn't paid for, wasn't necessary, that left us dramatically in debt. At the time he took over this economy, we were hemorrhaging jobs to the tune of 700,000 jobs a year. And it was the worst recession since the Great Depression. And Barack Obama, through his leadership, brought us out of that to the point we've had economic recovery, that they've had job creation every quarter since then. And to say that that we're in a terrible state is just not true. We're much better off than we were 8 years ago. The problems created by the Bush-Cheney war in Iraq just won't go away. Those poor young men and women that fought gallantly and valiantly for their country there, that came back here, and some who didn't come back, and who came back here very seriously injured, we have to pay for. And it's just tragic. It was a war that shouldn't have been fought, and it's the economic and the moral consequences of that war are pretty significant.
And that leads to the second question about the division in the nation. There's such a division right now, right down the line, which this will go back to you, because I'm sure you have some response to some of Larry's philosophies, and that's what it comes down to. It's a philosophy that has changed, not just based on the Obama administration and its successes and failures, whatever those might be, but also what the future holds with Donald Trump. There's a lot of fear, and there's also a lot of excitement as well. And then there's the Hillary Clinton factor, because Hillary, maybe things happened within her campaign. There's still the question about the Russian hacking that could have undermined her campaign, which could well be. So is he, as Mr. Lewis said, out of Georgia, is Donald Trump a legitimate president? I mean, this is something else that was questioned as well. But I'm going to send the microphone back to you to respond.
Well, first of all, I really think the people in this country are really kind of tired of hearing that. And I really think that if it keeps going, that it's eventually going to backfire on the Democrats and the people who keep pushing this agenda.
They're tired of what?
Of saying that Donald Trump is not a legitimate president, that Donald Trump is this and Donald Trump is that, the Republicans are this, Republicans are that. I just really think that we need to put that to rest. Let's stop and let's, move forward. The election is over. Donald Trump won the Electoral College. Both candidates knew that you had to win the Electoral College to become president. I mean, that's not a surprise. It's been happening for 240 years. Whether or not the Republicans or the Russians, well, first of all, Vladimir Putin did not call me and tell me to vote for Donald Trump. And secondly, if the Russians did hack the emails of the Democrats, then it just proves to me that they were stupid enough to put them out there to be hacked. So, and thirdly, they have determined that there is no evidence that any of the voting was compromised in the election. Okay, let's go back to you talked about the divisiveness.
Yeah, the division.
Well, I think most people who watch this know that I had a son who we lost in Iraq, First Lieutenant Aaron Season. Reports we got back from Aaron were that good things were happening. He always reported that, the American public are not being told by the media about the good things that were happening, the progress that we were making in Iraq. Schools were being built, infrastructure was being built, the Iraqi people voted for the first time in free elections. I think the biggest mistake that was made was pulling out of Iraq before we needed to pull out. I do believe that, many of the military individuals did not want to pull out of Iraq. They wanted to stay there to establish stability, which we were doing. We pulled out, and look what's happened. ISIS has filled the gap. They're even using the equipment that we left behind. So I really think that was a big mistake. And I'm not going to argue about, what was done in the past. Here we are again blaming George Bush for what happened. We keep going back and blaming George Bush and the Republicans. I'm not going to do that. That's over. That's done. Donald Trump is the president. Let's move on and let's work together to make this country the way it should be. Americans first, and let's show the world that we mean business. And if Donald Trump wants to get close to Putin and to China, I think we should. I think we should be allies. I think the three countries should work together and do the best we can for the world.
Larry?
Well, I think if you don't learn from the mistakes of the past, then you never can correct them in the future. And I don't know that Donald Trump understands that. And for him to say that he disagrees with the entire intelligence community over the dangers that Vladimir Putin and his cronyism in the former in Russia is just nothing to be concerned about, then frankly I think we have to be concerned about the fact that this president believes he's above everyone else. And I don't think he is. I think he's very good. He's probably a genius in marketing. He's a genius in selling the snake oil. But there's nothing else that indicates that he is competent to hold the presidency of the United States. And that was pretty much brought out by the number of viable Republicans that didn't even support him in the general election. But again, I think what's going to happen in the next 4 years, or no one knows, because he does not have a basic ideology. He had no specific plans, and I don't think he will have any specific plans. We should be concerned also by the appointments he makes, which appear to be putting people in place that don't even believe in the agency in which they're being put in place to lead. Or even getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, which has had very positive influences on the United States. And a lot of people have benefited from that. The most interesting thing, which Tom should at least have some positive from the Affordable Care Act, is that the abortion rate in the United States dropped dramatically because of the Affordable Care Act, because women had the appropriate access to birth control methods. And those are the kind of positive movements we should look forward to and not always be destructive about everything that's occurred that's done by one party or the other. And hopefully the parties will get together on that. But frankly, the ball's in the Republican Party's court now, because they've got the presidency, they've got the Senate,
And they got the down ballot.
and they've got the House of Representatives. So.
And that being said, what does Donald Trump, this would go back to you, what does he do to address the division that we have right now? Because, you mentioned about the Electoral College. There's pros and cons to the arguments about the Electoral College. There always will be, and there always has been, versus the popular vote. The popular vote was immense against or for the Clinton campaign. But let's set that to the side. Because of the way this ended up, there is a tremendous, and the protests as recent as this weekend reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to those people if you're Donald Trump? How do you soothe this nation? And that's his responsibility to do that.
Well, I've always been a peacemaker. I believe that you try to sit down with everyone, you try to work together to get an agreeable solution to the situation. Mm-hmm. I just think that we have people in this country that have been entitled for too long, have not grown up yet.
But that's not answering my question.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
And I think that you have to work with those individuals and be able to, as I said before, sit down, work together, work to an agreeable solution to the situation. I think that all sides have to be listened to. But I think there comes a point where, people just get kind of tired of it, and you just kind of have to go on and make your decisions. And I think a lot of this will subside when policies are made, actions are taken.
Could be. Mm-hmm.
And I think when good results finally come from what's happening, I think a lot of this will subside.
Larry?
Oh, I don't think that's going to happen at all. There were very positive and good results coming from the Barack Obama 8 years in the White House. And he was not given credit for the good results that came out. And the false information that came out, there are people in this country that actually think the economy got worse, that unemployment got worse while he was in office, and that wasn't true. So I don't see how that can go. You can't do it by creating your own reality of what's occurring. You have to accept the facts as they are, and if you're not willing to accept the facts, then I think the opposition has a duty to tell people that is not factually correct. And until you understand it's not factually correct, we can't achieve any progress in this country. And in terms of those that have to grow up, frankly, I think those that are making hundreds of millions of dollars, while there too many in this country are working at minimum wage, or when they grow up. I mean, over the past 30 years, the dramatic shift in wealth in this country from to the top 1% is just absolutely astonishing that people haven't spoken out more. And Bernie Sanders was speaking out more for it. Hillary Clinton, unfortunately, was late on board with that. But I haven't heard Donald Trump say anything, because he, in fact, continues to appoint those billionaires to these appointments. So the people that need to grow up are those that are making billions of dollars and saying, wait a minute, we're taxed too much. that we don't have enough money, that somehow or another they are being dragged down by society, and if you just open up the gates, that it'll trickle down to the rest of us, just isn't true. Trickle-down economics has never worked. It didn't work under Reagan. It didn't work under any administration, because when the rich get richer, all they do is get richer.
Now, as we look at that, we could probably sit here all night, and we're going to have two different schools of thought from two different wonderful men in our community, and then the weird guy in the middle. So I think what we need to do also is take a look here locally at Stark County, which represents a voice of a portion of the nation. There are people that are split as well. However, as we sit here tonight, Donald Trump is the president. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I am a Democrat. I've been on the Democratic ticket. I will now stand back and I will watch Donald Trump and this administration, because that's all I can do, and see what happens. I'm doing that out of respect, not because I agree. That being said, a lot of people aren't being that way. A lot of people are still being confrontational. Regardless of what side you're on, you've got people on the Clinton side that were voting for her, people on the Trump side voting for him, and they're bumping heads, even here in Stark County, because the philosophies are so different. I guess where I'm leading up to is what created so much more anger, aside from the different thoughts of each candidate in this election. Could it have been related to social media? Is this something that needs to be addressed? Because social media, at this point, with its fake news, its real news, its opinions, it's like I don't know if you all had a mini bike when you were a kid. You had that little mini bike, and then you take the governor off. And then that governor, when it's off, it just goes. So the opinions of people are out of control.
Well, and I think that is a problem too. And I think his impression that all journalists are liars, the lying media, is extremely damaging, because the one thing that the media is supposed to do is be a critique of the powering of the powers that be, whether it be the president, a state representative, a U.S. senator, or the governor of the state of Ohio. And as soon as you start saying that they're just liars, I mean, the media usually does not have an axe to grind. The media for centuries has been that independent body that went out and did their job, reported the facts, and then and held people's feet to the fire. And they weren't liars for the most part.
Yeah, but yet again, with every traditional media that brings that integrity in journalism with it, there's 5 others that will undermine that specific outlet's integrity, because they're using fake news, they're using spins, and then Joe Public or Jane Public, they don't know what to believe. They don't know what to believe about Donald Trump, what's real, what's not real about Donald, or about Clinton and her emails, what's real with Comey, the director, and then folks here in Stark County. It's like, I'm scratching my head here. I don't know what to believe. This is an issue.
Well, I'm not, the purpose of this
Conversation
kind of was not to bash, people or anything. It was just trying to get, our feelings and look at the reality of the situation. Sure. First of all, Larry, I really think it's really interesting, some of the things that you said. You having been on council for a long time, having dealt with the media and knowing that the stories that were printed in the media from council meetings were not always in a way that happened at the meeting the night before. There were always spins on things, lines taken out of context, things that people said that were kind of spun around a little bit. So that did happen. I've had numerous experiences with the media and the positions that I've had, being on the Board of Education, being on council, where things just were not reported the way that they actually happened. So there is some spin, and there are sometimes journalists take liberties in doing their story. Yes, I really think that social media has a lot of responsibility for what has happened in this country, especially with this election. I think the social media led the American people down a path that basically said that Hillary Clinton was going to win, hands down. I think there are just hundreds of citations that you can go to, and I really think the people, the Democrats and the people in Hillary's camp, believe that. I don't think they even thought that there was a chance that Donald Trump would win. Me, I knew that there was. I just felt that he was going to win because of things that were happening, the support that he was getting, his rallies. I took a trip to visit my daughter in Findlay, and on the way I saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Donald Trump signs. And I took that trip the week before, and I knew he was going to win. And I just knew that the media was leading people down the wrong path. I think had the social media been honest and objective through the whole campaign, I think maybe things would have turned out a little bit differently. I think people might have had an objective idea that, this is going to be a tough battle. This is going to be a tough race. It's not a done deal. It's not a done deal. And I just really think that people were led down that path. That being said, I think that if the media continue, and the media is continuing, they're not stopping. And I'm even going to bring Fox News into this too, because they keep it up too. They keep, putting these stories on, of these things that are happening.
Well, they all do, yeah.
And, they're all to blame. And I think they've got to stop it because it just continues to feed the fire. It continues to feed the fire. And I think maybe if that can stop, I think maybe then we'll be able to get to the point where people can sit down and really look at the issues objectively and start to really have some dialogue. Let's stop blaming Donald Trump for being a billionaire. Let's stop blaming Donald Trump for making all these appointments to the cabinet. Let's stop Hillary Clinton this and Obama this and Bush this. Let's just stop it. And I think if we got to be a little bit more objective, I think things will get done.
That's why social media can actually be very dangerous to the future of this nation.
Right.
It's going to play a role, and like you said, you got to pass over a lot of this stuff, but a lot of people don't.
No, and I can guarantee you some of the former friends I had on social media were accepting this stuff as being true. Yeah. And when you confronted them with the facts, not only did they not want to believe you, but they became very aggressive at you about even challenging them.
Both sides.
Both sides.
Oh yeah,
well,
yeah.
I'm sure it happened both sides, but the stuff I got, I mean, it was entire. I mean, really, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were mass murderers? I mean, come on. I mean, seriously.
You mean they weren't?
No, but that's
darn.
There are some people that actually
That's
believe that.
why I voted for Trump.
Oh, jeez. As we conclude
this was just getting good.
I know. I mean, we could have probably dedicated the whole show to this. As we conclude tonight, I'd like to get some maybe closing philosophies from the two of you from both sides of the aisle. Obviously, to be able to come to work together, because that's what it's going to come down to, is working together regardless of your political affiliation, and maybe insert a little way that getting involved is always going to be a pivotal part in the future of our nation. Getting involved, beginning locally,
right,
with your own city government, with your own organizations. Get out there and get involved with your party and be more supportive, whether it's the Democratic side, the Republican side, what have you. Go and do that. But we'll close here with maybe a few closing statements. Tom, we opened with Larry, so we'll close with you first.
Well, I agree. I think people need to really know what's going on. They can't live in a bubble. They can't live with their head in the ground. They really need to know what's going on. They do need to get involved. Mm-hmm. It pains me to see that There are so many social organizations, traditional social organizations that are struggling because they can't get new members, because people don't want to get involved. We can't get good candidates to run for office. We can't get candidates to run for school board, and I think that's really sad. I think the young people need to step up. I understand that people are really into their families now. Our kids have way too many activities, so they're going all over the place. But I really think the young people kind of need to step up, get involved in their community, get involved in social organizations, and that's how they learn. And I just hope that more people do get involved, more people get active, socially, politically, spiritually, especially. That's what needs to happen.
Okay, Larry?
Well, and I would agree with that. And the nice thing about being in a small community like we are, we get to know people of the opposite side, like Tom, who's I consider him a very good friend. And we disagree on a lot of things, but as I will tell everyone that I talk to, the most disagreeable person in terms of what you agree with and what you're thinking about probably disagrees with you less than 5% of the time. I mean, you agree on 95% everything else, and why we get wrapped up on the 5% so much is beyond me. And the other thing is you can disagree without being disagreeable. Now, Tom has never been disagreeable with me when we disagreed on things. And
I agree.
And we need more of that. And I've found very few people in my community that became disagreeable when I disagreed with them. And frankly, some of the most disagreeable people I had disagreements were with my own party. So it has nothing to do with politics most of the time, and it's almost always has to do just with your own, personality.
Yeah.
So
that is true.
If our state legislators, our U.S. congressmen, our U.S. senators would just learn what they used to be, and go back to the days where they were on city councils and when they were on school boards, and remember what they had to do then to reach an agreement, I think we'd all be a lot better off. I also think we'd be a lot better off if we took the money out of politics. I've always said maybe we should run some sort of a lottery to become a congressperson, and you go in for 6 years if you wanted to be, and you were drawn, you go in and do it. I mean, I don't know. There's got to be a better way than what we do now, because they spend way too much time campaigning and way too much time, talking to those that have paid their bills as opposed to those of us that tell them this is what we need to do.
Big business.
And then reach some sort of common ground. There's always a common ground.
And that's what we hope to do. We hope that Mr. Trump can do that. We'll see. All we can do now, whether you support him or you oppose, is you need to show respect as an American for the office of the President of the United States, to sit back and watch it play out and just wish him the best of luck, in running our nation.